Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And grinding. Grinding is, well, what most of us spend our time doing in this game. Grinding up them tech lines to get that big, beautiful tier 10 ship, right? And, along the way, most of the ships are pretty solid. Some of them are absolutely amazing. However, there are some that are just absolutely miserable to grind through. And that's what we're going through in today's video. My top 5 worst grinds in the game. Most of these are individual ships, as, most tech lines, they're pretty alright, and they have a rough spot here or there. There's not a whole lot of tech lines that the whole thing's just miserable, but there is one in this video. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get on into it. Coming in at number 5, we have the Tier 9 German battleship, the FDG. Man, the FDG, I absolutely shot myself in the foot when I was going through the German battleship line. I got to the Bismarck, and I was getting pretty close to the end of the Bismarck grind. I forget what event was going on. I think it was the anniversary event. And back in the day, they would, during the anniversary event, or whatever event was going on, again, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but either way, the conversion rate for ship XP to free XP was improved so that you could, of course, spend less doubloons and you'd get more free XP out of it. So because of that, I went ahead and I just free XP'd the last bit of my Bismarck grind in order to get to the FDG. That was a mistake because I, dear viewer, got stuck grinding a completely stock FDG to get to the GK. And this was years ago, back before the German battleships got the American battleship dispersion ellipse. If you think the German battleships' main battery guns are inaccurate today, go watch some footage of them from, I think, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, before they got that buff. Oh my god, talk about not being able to hit the broadside of a barn from within the barn. And this is the Tier 9 ship we're talking about, fellas. So, Tier 9s in most cases are where 99% of tech lines start to get really good when you get to the Tier 9. The Tier 8s typically, it's an alright ship, but it's a long grind because you gotta get to the Tier 9. Tier 9 is a pretty powerful ship, and then, it's the gateway to the Tier 10. But the FDG, boy, this thing was mega bad back in the day. Granted, today's FDG has gotten quite a few buffs to help it out. The AP has been improved. Again, we got the American battleship dispersion ellipse for the main battery guns now, and that makes it a lot more tolerable of a ship nowadays. But man, this thing was rough. Although I can't imagine the FDG would be exactly an easy grind today with the way that the high tier meta is and all the crazy ships we have at Tier 9, and you have to contend with super ships now too. I mean, the thing, like most of the German main battleship line, it's a massive target, armor gets chunked at range like it's nothing. Huge ships, so you're getting farmed down by HE all the time. So imagine that, but back in the day, can't hit anything with the main battery guns, and whew, man. Yeah, that grind sucked for sure. Nothing like watching all of your shells go into the water from 6 kilometers away. And I know I exaggerate a lot here on this channel, guys, but literally when you used to back in the day with the FDG and a lot of the German mainline ships back in the day, you would throw half of your shells in the water from 6 to 8 kilometers away from the target ship. I'm not joking. The guns used to be that bad. So while she's definitely a lot more comfortable in today's World of Warships, definitely for me personally, one of my worst grinding experiences ever. However, of course, the number 4 spot is even worse, which is the Tier 9 Japanese battleship, the Izumo. Oh, the Izumo. I really didn't learn a lot doing the German battleship line, in that manner where I free XP'd from the Tier 8 to the Tier 9. I just really wanted the Yammy, so I did the same thing. Now, granted, this time I didn't pay to convert the free XP. I just had the free XP sitting around. So I free XP'd the rest of my Amagi grind to get to the Izumo. And yeah, I got stuck in the stock Izumo grind. And oh my god, this thing was a real turd back in the day. Like a solid, giant, floating Japanese turd with... Good lord. I mean, you had no AA, no secondary guns to even contribute to AA. I think you had literally 4 secondary mounts on the stock hull with the Izumo. So CVs just didn't really care. And this is back pre-CV rework, right? So we're talking about RTS CVs that, when you have someone that knows what they're doing, they can just absolutely wipe an entire flank with you, right? So, God, this is bringing back some terrible memories. And the gun configuration isn't the worst, but it's just super awkward that like the number 3 turret has to take an eternity to rotate from one side to the other side. So that was very frustrating grinding through this thing stock, and it's slow, it's immaneuverable. The AP was just bad, so bad back in the day. In fact, I'm pretty sure the Amagi's AP was actually better than the Izumo. I'm sure you guys will correct me in the comments if that is incorrect, but it just felt like it bounced so much, it shattered a lot, and so forth and so on. And it was such a painful grind going from the A to the B, then finally to the C hull in the Izumo. Now, when I finally got to the C hull in the Izumo, that's the one where you've got a decent amount of AA, you've got a decent amount of secondary guns, but it felt like it did nothing. I mean, look at the amount of deck space on the Izumo. There's so much free real estate here that you can put additional AA guns, maybe more secondary guns. Oh, the secondary guns, too, they're all just, like, laid out in a row at the same height. They're not staggered, so even when you're, like, bow on or angled on to an enemy ship like you're going to be because of the Izumo's turret layout, secondaries can't really get on target. And I'm not saying the Izumo's a secondary battleship, but, those secondary guns, every now and then, even then firing wildly, they can get a couple of hits in, start some fires, and you'd be surprised how much that actually does help in some close quarter situations in the game. So it's just a miserable experience. Now, very much like the FDG, the Izumo has received quite a bit of love from wargaming over the years. Her giant deck, got a bit of an armor buff to where it shatters most HE shells. That second layer deck, not the bottom deck or the lowest deck, that can still be pinned no problem by anyone that can get through 32 millimeters of armor. But that mid deck is 55 millimeters of armor now, so that thankfully does shatter HE. Thank God. Back in the day, again, no problem for most cruisers at higher tier to just absolutely farm your deck down because it's a giant deck space, right? The Izumo was for a while one of the bigger battleships in game, and you have just a perfectly flat deck space for all this HE just to go right through and pin, right? So thankfully that did get buffed. Her AP shells got buffed as well, which thank God. They're actually pretty good nowadays. The good thing about the Izumo is that she does have this stupidly thick belt armor to where when you are sitting not broadside on, but angled onto the enemy team, kind of baiting them to shoot into your broadside, it will bounce most of the shells that get thrown at it, which is about everything really. And that was its saving grace back in the day, but it was still just such a slow turtle of a ship, and God, I don't miss this thing, this old thing. Again, the new one's quite a bit better, quite a bit more comfortable to play in today's World of Warships, but again, for me personally, this was a terrible grind back in the days of old. But going on down now to number 3, something a little bit newer is the Tier 8 tech line Italian battleship, the Veneto. The Veneto, man, really, the Veneto is where the Italian battleships start to not suck terribly badly, but at the same time, it's more of what you've been having to go through with the mid-tier ships. But now you're in higher tier matchmaking. You have 9 15-inch guns with sap shells, which mean a long reload time to balance the sap alpha and not the best accuracy, again, to balance the alpha of the sap shells. If you guys don't know how sap works, sap shells, they penetrate a whole hell of a lot more than standard HE shells do. They have a higher alpha damage rating, meaning that they pin more armor and they do a lot higher damage numbers than what HE normally does. So when you're going up against lightly armored targets like light cruisers, really any cruisers or battleship extremities or superstructure, they'll pin and they'll do a high bit of damage. But the trade-off for that with the Italian battleships, because if you had, all your shells, not all your shells, if you had most of your shells landing on target consistently, you'd be doing ridiculous numbers of damage, so it has to be balanced by being inaccurate and these ships having a long reload time. And the Veneto's stuck here with 9 15-inch guns at tier 8, which isn't really, a bad amount or caliber of guns to have at tier 8, but the long reload time and the absolutely abysmal dispersion doesn't really help whatsoever. So you're dealing with that, and, well, I mean, the Veneto, it's got a very similar armor scheme to the Roma, so if you play the Roma, it's about the same armor there. Well, it actually is exactly the same bit of armor there. They're pretty tough from the bow in, but man, you catch one of these things on the side and it absolutely hurts. Which is something that might happen, unfortunately, a fair amount because of how inaccurate the guns are. You want to get all 9 of your guns on target as much as possible because the front 2 turrets, you're probably going to put over half of those shells in the water. So, again, you want to throw as many shells as you can at the enemy ships to hopefully, get as many shells as possible on target. You get caught broadside, you get blapped back to port. Or if you stay angled, then you're going to wind up, again, throwing most of your shots in the water with just your front 2 turrets. Now, she does get the exhaust smoke to help her out, remain stealthy and disengage and get close to the enemy team. You can smoke up, get within, about 10 kilometers in, you are landing more shots than missing, right? So if you can get like that close, it's pretty solid. But it's just, God, it's like it's almost there, right? It's a little bit more accurate than the mid-tier ships. You got the armor, you got the HP, the maneuverability, and the the exhaust smoke to get you there, but it's not quite there yet. You're on the verge of greatness, and you have to, of course, deal with not quite being there just yet, and of course the absolutely crappy Italian AA on top of all of that. But man, it is worth it because the Lepanto finally you have 12 15-inch guns. You start getting that high number of guns, that high volume of fire that you need to really do well in the Italian battleships. So it's just so frustrating that you're almost there, but you still got to deal with this last bit of just absolutely terribleness from the Italian battleship line before you can get to that gloriousness with the tier 9 and then later on the Colombo. And keep in mind too, with the dispersion you're seeing on screen, this is after they buffed it, right? They gave most of the mid-tier ships, I think they even gave, they did give the Colombo, they gave all the Italian battleships a buff to their Sigma finally, and a slight reload buff, again, depending upon what exact ship we're talking about. So this is the improved version of this ship. So imagine going through this the old-fashioned way. God, it was miserable. All right, heading on down to number 2, we have the only entire tech line on this list. That is the British heavy cruisers. Oh my God. These things explode more than the light cruisers do, which is just like, what? They're heavy cruisers, right? Well, while they are heavy cruisers in terms of their guns, the armor is still very much British in most cases, right? So it's, God, they do get a super heal at mid tier to help them out, right? To recover from losing half of their HP, which is nice, right? But you're still getting absolutely blapped by anything with slightly large guns. The shells are really floaty, like they feel very, very similar to American shells, American cruiser shells. That takes like two days to get to the target, right? So at range, well, speaking of range, you don't really have much range. Most of these ships have fairly low ranges on the main battery guns, so you have to get close to the enemy team. And even when you're on the edge of your range, because the shells are so floaty, it feels like you're not close enough. So you get closer, you get blapped, and back to port for you, right? So it's just a slog to get through the British heavy cruisers. Is it worth it? The Goliath is pretty solid, in my opinion. It's probably the ship I'm going to be playing for the background footage because it's, well, the only one that's pretty good, right? But, it's kind of worth the pain. Goliath is a nice cockroach cruiser that, you can put a Goliath on an off-flank and they'll survive for a very long time, being annoying to the enemy team and, burning ships down with their HE. That's another good thing about the line, too. The HE is very solid. You have nice alpha, high fire chance, but again, the ships kind of explode. If you're not very careful, you're going to be, going back to port quite often with your British heavy cruisers. So not a line that was an overly joyous experience to grind, but the Goliath was very much worth it, in my opinion. But yeah, I really wouldn't want to grind them in today's World of Warships, especially again, once you get to the tier 9, you have to deal with super ships, right, and all the craziness that we have nowadays in the game as well with, again, all the ships that have radar, improved AP, so forth and so on. All right, going on down to our number 1 slot is the tier 7 tech line American battleship, the Colorado. So the Colorado, my God, it's got to be a cruel joke, right? That now you have to grind through the Colorado, 3 times to get to the Montana, to get to the Louisiana, and to get to the Vermont. All those lines start at the Colorado. So Wargaming is having a laugh at our expense when it comes to forcing players to play through the Colorado that much. And, I was doing my free-to-play grind for my alternative account to get to the Montana, and I played the Colorado without any premium time, without any boosters or anything like that. And you know what? It's still not that great. I know how to play the game a lot more than I do the first time I went through the Colorado, but my God, it still does suck, especially, again, in today's World of Warships, because now there's submarines, right? And you're here in this absolutely just slow ship that, on a good day going downhill with a tailwind can maybe go 23 knots, and wow. That's not great when there's submarines about with homing torpedoes and such. That's pure misery. I mean, you get 16-inch guns at tier 7, which is pretty nice, so you have a good amount of overmatch capability there. But the thing is just so slow. It's still got that dreadnought style armor. You get chunked from every direction, it feels like, in the Colorado. The guns, although I know that they're pretty accurate on paper. Oh my God, I wish they would actually hit more. Oh my God, yeah, it's just such a not nice time in the Colorado. And someone at Wargaming, again, had to have known this when they put 3 American battleship branches branching off of the Colorado. They had to be cackling when they made that decision. So hats off to you, buddy, trolling everybody by making us play through the Colorado 3 times more than anyone should ever have to do. When I grinded to the Montana, I parked my Colorado in port. I didn't touch it. The only time I touched it was on make videos talking about how terrible it was grinding through it. So yeah, it's still pretty not great in today's World of Warships. Even me with like the 12,000 battles I have under my belt, it's not a fun time playing it. Every now and then I might take it out just to reminisce about how good it can be in the right situations when the stars align and you're top tier. But God, playing this thing in tier 9 is it just sucks. It sucks so much. Everyone can run laps around you. Everyone can overtake you, except for, of course, the other battle ships. The Vermont line, right? It's just, I'm so glad I don't have to play this thing anymore, guys, except for when I talk about it in a video. So I'm going to stop talking about it now so I don't have to play it anymore. But anyway, guys, those are my top 5 worst grinds, in my opinion, of course, and in my experience. Let me know in the comments down below, what are your top 5 worst grinds? What lines did, almost make you pull out your hair when you were going through them? Share all those wonderful experiences with us in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and, well, hope to see you guys in the next one.